Hello and welcome to season 6, episode 19 of Dualistic Unity. I am feeling all sorts of different things, but I'm settling on pretty solid right now. Just excited, enthusiastic, not really having any idea about where this conversation is going to go, but excited to find out with you.
I think that's probably the thing that I enjoy the most about not just dualistic unity, because admittedly it took me 30 years of being in the workforce to get to this job, but just employment as a whole. Just the understanding that the more authentic you are, the more present you are, the more adaptable you are, the better the experience really is, not just for you, but for everybody you're working with, because you start to work as a whole and instead of just trying to cope with your part within the whole that you don't otherwise appreciate. And on that note, I'm excited for today's guest for a couple of reasons. The first is I had no idea who this person was until she reached out to me and said, "Hey, I really like your podcast, and I think I would be an awesome guest to be on your podcast." And so I went and checked out what it is she does. And indeed, she will be an awesome guest to be on this podcast. We are joined today by Stephanie Coradin. And Stephanie has 18 years, almost 2 decades of experience in coaching and training in both hospitality and in governmental services. A lot of experience, a lot of wisdom, more importantly, a lot of contact with a lot of human beings. And so this is going to be a very interesting conversation. Stephanie was also recently featured in Global Hospitality Magazine as Leadership Trainer of the Year. And considering that Dembo Inc. is focused on the recognition that great service is often the result of empowered employees who feel valued and trusted, I am very curious to find out where that insight came from, first of all, because obviously, with all of that experience, there has to be some good story behind people are important. And I know people are important, as well as how it is you implement that in Dembo Inc. So, Stephanie, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to tell us and our listeners a little bit about yourself and your origin story as it is, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Ray, Andrew. I am excited to be here with you all. And just to start, like you said, people are important. And the more we acknowledge that, the better it is for everybody. But in origin story, I started in hospitality when I was 17, where the guest is king, right? Or queen. But that's where I started. I worked my way up from I started as a server, became a bartender as soon as I hit 18, got my liquor license, became a bartender. So I was like unofficial therapist, right? For a while there. And I got into hotels. I worked front desk to start, and then I worked all the way up into learning and development. And my last position in corporate was as director of learning and development. But in between all of that, I had the brilliant idea that I would go into psychology. I went and got my master's degree in mental health counseling. And the reason I always mention that is because those two, between my business acumen, my MBA, I also have a master's degree in business administration, and mental health counseling, I brought those two together. And that's when I realized, dun dun dun, if we treat people better, they will definitely take ownership of their jobs, right? So mind blowing. So that's where I would say that's the basis of all of my work. I started to stop the cookie cutter trainings and just basically learn about people and where we are, because different things happen in different environments. And so the environment counts for how you train people and what they expect from that training. And just off the bat, I'll start by saying it's not always about the money. So I'll leave it at that and we can start from there.
That is incredible. And it sounds like you really value the ability to be fluid and I get to know, as you said, the people as opposed to so much the overarching organization. I'm super curious because I know you've worked with Department of Justice and Homeland Security before and certain organizations that I don't know, maybe it's my own sort of generalization about them, but they don't seem as fluid. They seem very, very structured. A lot of governmental agencies are very, very rigid and structured. And so I'm just, I guess, curious how, if you shift, your interactions with them, knowing that there's a little bit more desire to be in control in those situations, and how it plays into the person to person sort of interactions while having to maybe follow more quote unquote rules
Oh,
in
sure,
those
definitely.
organizations.
Yes, and you're 100% correct. They are more strict. There are more boundaries. They are a little bit more rigid for obvious reasons, right? But one thing that I always start with, even when I go into, let's say, Homeland Security, is that once you are transparent, so people like to know why they're doing something. It's not about what they're doing. Like you may tell somebody, hey, you have to fix the bed every morning. And that's a very basic, simple thing, right? But if you tell them why they should fix the bed every morning, you'll find that obviously there's always going to be the outliers that still won't fix the bed, but most people will understand and they'll buy in to fixing the bed every morning because there's a reason behind it and there's like it makes sense to them, right? And that's where when I go into places, and believe it or not, some hotels are actually very rigid as well. But when I go into places where there are like strict rules and strict policies, making it more transparent, because that's one of the things that the people that came before us, I guess I should say, they weren't that transparent. They didn't understand that if you tell people more, then they'll do more for you, right? It was more do as I say, not as I do. I'm paying you to do a job, just do the job and move forward, right? So what I've learned and trained and helped people understand is that if you're explaining to people what they're doing and how they're doing it and why they're doing it, you get a buy-in. It's as simple as that.
See, I love the fact that what you're saying is essentially that you should become kind of emotionally invested in the people around you. Like you should recognize you have an influence on them and that they feel things like you do. And it just sounds so very simple, but most people they shy away from that because that sounds very complicated. It sounds very messy. If people are showing their emotions and I can show my emotions, anything could happen. I just want to go to a very sterile office environment where my cubicle is my cubicle and I don't have to talk to anybody because anything could happen from there. Right. And so how do you go about, I guess, fostering that level of faith in people, or rather giving them I guess I don't even know, exercises or discussions, opportunities to exercise that faith in themselves? How would you, in fact, lead the horse to water, as it were?
Right? So that's a really great question. And I'm going to say something that is super duper simple. Self-awareness. Like what I found is I cannot start with strategy. I cannot start with technicality. I can't start with any of that. I have to start by sitting people down and going through a process of making sure that they understand how they want to work first as a leader. How do you delegate? How do you like to listen? How do you like people to talk to you? Like it's self-awareness. And believe it or not, a lot of people don't even know like the answer to that until they sit there or they pay attention to it for a week and see what rubs them the wrong way. Like if a team member comes to them and asks them a question or asks them for a favor, how do they react to that emotionally? And until I bring that to their awareness, they don't even realize that they're moving, like a robot, for lack of a better word. So once they're understanding more about who they are and how they like to work, then it's easier for me to get them to, have that faith in themselves.
And so much of that is responsibility, right? Like, because I've had bosses in the past where, they have certain blow ups, and if they're not willing to be self aware, to take in that, like, oh, this crazy reaction, my anger is counteracting something else. Like, it isn't about my employees necessarily. Like, it's coming from me, but a lot of people want to assume, and then they'll complain. It's like, oh, my employees, they're doing all this, and it's like, maybe there's something there, but where is their stuff coming from? And so is that process of helping someone become more self-aware, especially someone who's maybe almost like built a lot of trust in themselves, a higher up, like a CEO, for example, in the way that they've done things while sort of avoiding certain tendencies, like their way has worked. I'm guessing there's points where they kind of butt up against, maybe there's a certain employee or someone they work with that they have a tougher time doing it with. Like, how are you able to someone with such a, you know, higher up position or maybe firm perspective of themselves, like turn it inward? Is there like a I don't want to say lubrication period, but like a greasing period where it's like ease them into that
Yeah.
perspective instead of just being like very jarring with it?
Yes, there's definitely a softening period, is what I call it. And one thing I like to say too is that they have to, so like you were just saying, the way they are rigid, it might work, but guess what? At one point, it's going to either stop working or, like you said, they're going to bump heads with somebody and they're going to realize something needs to be changed. Sometimes they don't realize that on their own. HR has to come in and tell them, hey, you need to do this. And what I find when they're told that they need to get the training or the coaching is it's a little bit harder. The buy-in is a little bit harder because they don't believe that they need it. Somebody else is telling them that they have to do it. But at the core of it, this is where I go into a little bit more mental health counseling as opposed to, training. Um, at the core of it, and you mentioned it a little bit, Andrew, it's not about their team members. It's not, sometimes it's not even about the job. It's about something that happened way back when that they're still carrying the trauma or, the hurt or whatever it is, right? So at that point, that's where I have to dance that therapeutic coaching line, right? And help them see that, there are better ways to do this. And sometimes it doesn't work. We're going to be honest with each other here. Sometimes you meet that person that has that wall and they need like either anger management classes or they need like real hardcore therapy, obviously. But for the most part, you're able to show the person. So this person complained about this. This person said you did this, and there's a common denominator here, and it's you, right? If you have 100 team members, if you have 200 team members, and everybody's saying the same thing, then it can't be 200 people that are wrong. So when you approach it that way, they kind of sit back and they're like, maybe I'm open to listening to you now, right? But like you said again, it's responsibility. And that's what I call emotional leadership.
See, I really like that, but I always find that to be like I guess the trajectory of maturity is taking on greater and greater responsibility. As you start to go not higher, but you get levels where you are, I guess, in a position of more influence over what happens in the company. There is more responsibility that goes with that. And a lot of times when we get that promotion, we're like, I'm ready for it. And then we get there, we're like, oh my God, what is happening? So that period, it can be really difficult because sometimes you just try to fake it. You're like, I'm doing fine, and things are just kind of getting shuffled underneath the carpet, as it were. Or you just end up folding in and relying on everybody else to kind of carry the weight for you. So how would you help somebody through that period? And again, in accepting that greater level of responsibility
Mhm.
without necessarily overarching, because it's not until you get into the higher echelon, quote unquote, where you can start, I guess, working against your corporate policies, like shooting from the hip.
Right? Totally. So one of the things in hotels specifically is you have a rock star team member, right? Let's choose housekeeping, for example, because that's an easy one, right? You have a rock star housekeeper. Like they are brilliant at their job. They can turn over 12 rooms. They can do the thing, right? So they're so good that when a supervisor position comes open, it's a no-brainer. You promote the rockstar team member, right? But that rockstar team member knows how to fix rooms. They do not know how to manage people. And that's exactly what you were just talking about right there. And so that's something, and the reason I take hospitality as an example, hotels as an example, is because it happens a whole lot. Like this is something that happens almost on a monthly basis where somebody's set up for failure. And it's not on purpose, obviously. They promote the person because they're so good at their job, but they have no leadership skills. they don't know how to do any of it, right? So that is one of the things that I work with people a lot on. So it's gonna have to go back to the basics. Like you're literally teaching them how to walk again, right? Because they know how to do the job. You know, hard skills, the technical skills are fine, but now you're teaching them soft skills. And that could be some ego trip, like a ego, like they're hurt because, hey, I know how to do this job, and now you're telling me I have to start all over with, you know, these little things like you should smile and you should talk to your team and all of that, especially if it's somebody that's been there a long time and the team is their friends. So that's another, you know, bump there. There's a conflict of interest where they don't know if they should, you know, manage that person or be buddies with that person. So that's like leadership, foundational leadership, like leadership 101. And that's where I would start with a person like that.
That is such a very good point. And it's
Hmm.
funny because you chose hospitality, but it's really almost everything. You know,
Yeah.
at one point I was running a painting crew, and it's very
Hmm.
much the same thing. It's like, you know, you've done a great job. We're going to put you in this
Hmm.
position. All of a sudden, they're all drinking beers at the end of the day. It's not even the end of the day. You're like, hold up, what just happened? Because you were stellar right up
Yep.
until you got to call the shots.
Yep.
And so it's, you don't want to tear them down. Don't want to say like you're not ready for this, but on the other
Hmm.
hand, you want to have a meaningful conversation with them.
Exactly, exactly. There should be some training done before that transition happens. It's not that you don't want to promote, you should always promote from within, but there should definitely be a training period there.
Because there's that understanding that like it's a different job, right? In that situation where it's, housekeeping to manager, even if it's managing housekeeping, it's like it's incredible that you understand the basics, but like it's an entirely different job. And like, I mean, that's very symbolic for kind of everything as we get comfortable with certain things and then we build an identity around that. Like I know housekeeping super well. I am the goat of housekeeping, but that doesn't mean it's going to translate into a managerial role, but it has the potential to, if you're willing to do almost that like one step back for two steps forward sort of thing. Like I think that's so much of just change in general is the willingness to like let go of that identity because like that's it in that area. It's like in high school sports, if you're the best kid on junior varsity, you feel really good about yourself, but you have less context. It's like you're good within your sort of tunnel vision, and then you go to varsity or you go to college or you go to professional or whatever, and that awareness sort of expands. And if you're still holding on to like me feeling good because I'm the best on this team or I'm the best housekeeper, there's going to be a conflict right there because you're not the best anymore. So it's like, and that's to your point about self-awareness, like not holding on so much to those things, thinking that like that means something about you is probably vital in the workforce, just in general with shifts. So does that is that sometimes a priority? Is just like that sort of, I guess, one step back for two steps forward, or just a willingness to question what you think you're pulling from a certain title or role, as opposed to like, and how much that's taking away from you actually being the best version of yourself in that role?
Yes, definitely. So a lot of times, unfortunately, by the time I get there, the person's already in the role that they shouldn't have been yet given, right? So it is a little bit of a pull and conflict on them because now I have to, for lack of a better word, remove them from the role and train them for the role, right? So that in itself could be a conflict a little bit and it could be hard for them. But to your point, if I do get to have that person before they start their role, before they move into the managerial role, it's a little bit easier, it's a little bit smoother because they're not there yet. And I can show them what they're getting into so they can understand that, yes, your identity is you're a rock star team member here. And my goal is to make you continue being that rock star team member, but you need to learn this piece of it, right? You have that piece. you need to learn this piece, and together you'll continue being that rockstar team member. And most of the time, once you show somebody that way, in those aspects, they're like, okay, cool, bet. Let me learn. I want to continue being that rockstar team member while making more money, because here I'm making this money, and that's another part of it. Here I'm making this money, and if I learn this little piece, I can make that money, right? As opposed to being set up for failure, where you go and make that more money, but then you have to back up because you can't do the job.
Well said. I have a question, actually, because obviously you have all of this experience from working within this environment, but you don't work within this environment now. You actually have your own company. You are doing your own thing. And that must have been quite the transition for you. There must have been exactly the same need to go back to basics, as it were, as you're moving into this larger fishbowl. I would love to hear a little bit more about that transition.
So yes, it was a huge transition. And what I did, that I think helped me, is that I didn't do it like cold turkey. So I started off in 2009 part-time. So I worked my corporate job, and I worked part-time in my business all the way up until 2017. So I did it for a long time, right? Part-time. And that gave me the chance to do exactly what I'm saying, learn, understand what I needed, what was different. I never had to market before, right? And if I'm being very honest, even as a part-timer in my business, I still didn't have to market that much because I was in the industry, I was in corporate, and people knew that I had this part-time gig, right? It wasn't a secret, so everybody knew. So if it wasn't something that an employee was doing inside, they were referring me out. They were referring people to me. So I had that cushion at first, right? So even then, it was a little bit easier for me to transition, but I knew that I needed the marketing skills. I needed the, leadership skills in order to go off on my own altogether. And that's what I did. I got my own coach. I even got my own therapist, because this was, crazy, moving from having a steady paycheck to, you know, figuring it out, right? So yes, it was, and I think that gave me a different perspective, one, and also more experience to speak on it, because not only did I have to do that transition that I am walking people through, but also I had to hire people. I've had to, lead like on a separate, like even when I was a director of learning and development, I feel like I had standard operating procedures that I had to follow. Like I could still say, hey, it's not me. They told me I had to do it this way, right? But now I was they. I became they. So even that was a transition where, people are relying on me. People, they come to me, I'm it. So it was a process, to say the least, but it's doable. We're here.
That's amazing. And as a follow-up question, is that something that you offer in terms of a service? If somebody that you're talking to within the industry is like, I'm getting kind of tired of this shit. I'd like to work for myself, and in that situation, just because of, again, your own journey and how much you obviously love what you do, would you find yourself a little biased? Would you find yourself a little bit leaning towards like, yeah, jump ship, man, do it. It's worth it. Do it. Or would you be more along the lines of like, take your time, take it slow?
So I have done both, right? Depending on the person, right? I've done the, hey, it's time. You need to just jump ship and do what you got to do. But also I've done the other side of, I think you need to stay put, start slow, look at test your waters, see what you want to do. And the reason I say I've done both is because I've seen people who are ready. They're like, this is what I want to do. This is what I can set up, and da da da. So those people, they're more assertive, they're ready to take the risk, they know what's happening, they've done the research, as opposed to people who are like, I'm just tired of this. I think I want to go on my own, but they have no idea what business is, right? So I like to tell them, like, this is harder than working. at a, regular 9 to 5 job. This is something where you don't have anybody holding your hand. Nobody's going to tell you that you have to be at work at a certain time or you have to leave. So you can do whatever you want. Like your entire paycheck, your livelihood depends on you and you alone, right? So I make it clear.
And a lot of people aren't used to that experience right there. And so much of I feel like that, your whichever way you push someone from either jumping in immediately or, holding off for a sec is based on their own sort of experiences leading up to that, like how much how willing they are to face uncertainty and jump in, how much faith they have in themselves. Because someone with a lot of faith in themselves, you can kind of just drop them in to any situation. They'll adapt rather quickly, only because they've jumped in to a lot of situations over and over and over. Whereas someone who maybe hasn't, it's like it's an interesting like chicken or the egg type situation because like for them to ease in they're not jumping in, but there is, I guess, that little buffer just so it isn't so jarring that they lose their goddamn mind, as soon as they jump in. But it's yeah, I find it interesting just how much of life in general is that, but we see that in the workforce as well because it is totally different. Like we can speak to that for sure. I mean, this is my first time more or less being entrepreneurial, and it's been quite the, shift for me in a lot of ways of being willing to trust myself and have faith in myself, I think is one of the biggest things that I've learned. Whereas, I know Ray's been through a number of business ventures and whatnot, but it's fascinating how much you learn about yourself too when you go out on your own. And so I think that's a factor that maybe people don't factor in as much. It's like beyond just the work. It's like if you're willing to do it and face it, like you're gonna learn a lot about yourself because you're so close to the rudder of what's going on that you feel all the fluctuations. Whereas in more of a corporate 9 to 5, I think you're a lot further from the rudder. And so it doesn't maybe isn't quite as felt, but they both have their pros and cons, obviously.
I've told people if you really want to get to know who you are, definitely go start a business. But stick to it. Don't give up. Like don't give up after 3 months. Stick to it, right? You will grow tremendously and you will learn about yourself. Things that you never thought were who you were or who you are come start showing up. And a lot of things that don't even have to do anything with business come up for you. Like, you just go through all the stuff because, you're vulnerable. It's a state of vulnerability, especially when you're first starting and you don't know where you're going and, you know, things are just up in the air for you. It is. It's a ride. I wouldn't change it
Oh,
though.
I'm with you, Stephanie. It is quite the fucking ride. But I'm curious then, in your experience as someone who's been on both sides, who's made that jump, who's made that shift, what are some of the things that maybe you noticed about yourself that you couldn't have noticed if you hadn't jumped in on your own?
One of the things that I think I would say straight away that I've noticed about myself is how persistent I can be, you know, and how comfortable I can be with being uncomfortable. So for a long time, I didn't think I can get uncomfortable and be okay with it, like and not panic. I don't know if you guys have read that far back, but I have bad anxiety, like anxiety through the roof, right? And I used to say to myself, there's no way I can do this. Like I'm gonna never sleep at night or whatever. And I realized that, yeah, I can do it, you know? So I think the strength is what I've learned. Like I've learned how resourceful I can be.
That is amazing. And I love the
Hmm.
process there because it's not through telling yourself I am amazing. It's just through going through it. It's like I've just been through it enough. It was a quote I heard once that an expert is somebody who's done everything possible wrong in their field. They've just gone through it all, right? And they don't panic quite as much. They're like, I'll figure it out when it comes up. That said, though, there are people who will take the other path where they will work very hard. They will exercise a lot of attention and control and worry in order to get over that anxiety. It's like, no, 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 I need to just account for every detail. And I'm super intelligent because, of course, it takes a lot of intelligence to do that. So they get an idea of themselves. And they usually end up in leadership positions or management positions. And what they do without recognizing it is disempower everybody beneath them because they don't trust them. They straight up have this mentality of like, if I was doing that, it would already be done. Right. And so how do you deal with somebody in that position, because it's tearing down the company, it is in fact making everybody kind of lean on that person, and as talented as they might be, it's nothing compared to the combined might of everybody working together. How would you confront that person, especially given the fact that they're not likely going to want to listen to you?
right? So really quickly, I know you mentioned corporate, but believe it or not, I found that to be truer in people who are running their own small businesses. Entrepreneurs have a hard time delegating. They have a hard time letting go. They have a hard time, like they'll hire people to do work and then they're just killing themselves because no, nobody can do it as well as I can. But to go back to what you were saying, so yes, definitely I found so much that in corporate and like I said, in small businesses, disempowerment, not allowing people to do their job, not allowing people to take ownership. And one thing that I usually mention when it comes to that, especially with the people that are harder to let go or trying to keep everything close to their chest, is that when you do that, everybody else just gives up, right? They just give up and they wash their hands. And you end up out overworked, burnt out, doing everything because you think you're the only one that can do it. So at one point, everybody just lets you. And I found that a lot of times people think that they have bad employees or maybe somebody that's not really paying attention or who's not as close to the department as the supervisor of that department, the manager of that department. They just say, oh, he just got a bunch of bad employees. But the truth of the matter is, the leader is not allowing the employee to do what they have to do, what they should be doing, right? They're not letting them work. They're not letting them take ownership of their job. And so I've found that once I show them that, hey, if you can do this my way for just a couple of days, you will see a difference. And believe it or not, it always works. If you just do it just for a couple of days, just delegate instead of keeping it to yourself or not telling somebody how long they should take or how they should do something, right? There's 10,000 ways to do one thing and get the same results. Just let them, as long as you tell them this is what you need and this is how you would like, or what you would like done, this is the end result, let them go and figure it out, right? And I found that that helps a lot.
Oh, for sure. Because it's almost like releasing the grip in a sense. The couple days, it's like they can't even fathom releasing a bit. Just like just just a bit, just unclench a bit to allow some of I don't know what I'm holding on to. It's just holding on. The idea of holding on. We'll go with that. And because then it allows for the trust to be fostered in a sense. Because as a leader, if anything, if people don't trust themselves and you don't trust them, there's like a harsh divide there. And so I feel like as a leader, to be the first to trust will allow for someone else to maybe actually think they can trust themselves. But like that's leadership. It's not like directing them and not trusting them. It's being the first inkling of an idea of that person who maybe hasn't trusted themselves to be like, oh, well, my boss trusts me, so maybe I could trust myself. And do you see almost like that dynamic play out well when they are and then like the letting go and just for a couple of days just allowing
Mhm.
that to happen? Do you see shifts in employees?
Yes. So one of the main things as you're talking about trust, what came to mind is that not only do they not trust themselves? But sometimes the person trusts themselves fine. It's the leader that they don't trust. If you don't trust me, I don't trust you. Why don't you trust me? Because if you don't trust me, there's something wrong. So I'm not going to trust you. Right. And so having them take small tasks, like something that's not going to be um, mind blowing or earth shattering for the company or for the department, and having them let go of those little things just to start, it does go a long way. Like you said, just letting go just a little bit at a time to make sure that they're starting to buy in, because as soon as you start trusting them, then they'll start trusting you.
See,
Right.
I love that. I love the fact
Yeah.
that this is very much the same as I would do in coaching, because you're not trying to
Hmm.
convince them. You're saying, just give it a shot.
Yeah. Yep. See what happens. What's the worst that can happen is what I tell them. I'm like, what's the worst that can happen? If you just let that person, create the schedule today, just today. You can always go over it, later on or the next week. Just let them do it and see what happens. And a lot of times it works. And like I said, like you have some people that really have issues, especially the ones that have been doing it like this for 30 years. But most of the time you'll find people that are like, okay, let's try it your way. And once they try it and they see that their team members buy in, because that's always my end goal, to get your team members to buy in to what you're selling. It's not even about the company. It's you're the leader. You have these team members. They have to be able to trust you. They have to buy into what you're giving them, right? So once we can get it to that point, then everything else is a little bit smoother.
That's great. I like the contradiction, because often I think in a certain mentality, you think that leadership comes down to how important you are. And what we're very much saying here is, no, it's a trust thing. It's actually being the most willing to be vulnerable and say, please do this. Let's see what happens. And that takes a lot of courage. It takes a lot of faith in yourself and your ability, because you know very well things could go half-ass backwards, right? And then you just got to roll with that. But it's so different than the typical view we have of leadership.
Yep. And one more thing I'll say on that, it's the other side of that. I usually give them, it's like a ego trip, right? Like, so you hired that person. Are you a bad manager? Like, do you not trust your ability to hire somebody or to read a person? You hired them. So now let them do the job you hired them for, right? Because if they're not good enough for the job and you're the one who hired them, what does that say about you? It's a little bit of reverse psychology, but it works.
Oh yeah. Well done. Flip it back. Show them that mirror. It's like it's not them. It's not them. But it's interesting because like in the dynamics of a lot of the hierarchical, 9 to 5 sort of situations, there's a sense of more importance, the higher you go up. But from what I'm gleaning here is like there for the company to work in the most efficient way, it should actually be the inverse. Like the higher up you get, the less important you are in terms of what almost like what you think should be happening. And it's interesting too, because like it comes with so much weight. And that's why, you see super wealthy CEOs who are still frustrated as fuck all the time because they're still holding on to a lot of weight because they think that them being important is that important. But if they were to see that there's actually a benefit to you being less important just to your experience, because like then you're a little more free moment to moment because so much of our shackles are self-inflicted, put ourselves in our own sort of prison just in the way that we think about ourselves. But I can only imagine if it was more of the inverse in a company, that the higher up people got, the less important, the more important everyone else got to them, the less important they got to themselves. There would be a sort of seamlessness and efficiency to how a company works. And so I'm curious, like, if you've seen examples of that in corporations that have ended up working out super well, and also on the flip side, if you've seen corporations where it's like totally the opposite, and it's really tough to get someone higher up to let go of how important they think they are.
Yes, I've seen both. So I don't know if you've all heard of Sandals, the resorts. They're all over the islands and stuff like that. So Sandals is a conglomerate now. It's sandals, it's beaches. They also have like Starbucks in Atlanta, but most of their resorts are in islands. Like they started in Jamaica and they have them in the Bahamas, Barbados, like they're everywhere. But it's a big company and they're headquartered in Atlanta. And Adam Stewart is the CEO, chairman. He's the main guy, and he's one of those people that we can set that example that we can say is um, he believes that he's the less important one and everybody else under him is more important. And that has worked awesome for him. Like his team members are super happy no matter where you go or what interview you do. Like it's almost kind of like they're programmed to, that's how they like you. I rarely hear so many people talk so great about a company, right? And it's because he like boots on the ground, he's here, he's there, but he also listens to the people who are actually doing the job. And that's another thing that I always say. Like, you're all the way up here, so far removed. Yes, you're doing the bird's eye view, you're doing the strategies and making sure that the whole company stays afloat. But the little day-to-day details, you have no idea what's happening, right? So you have to listen to those people who are in the day-to-day so that you can get more perspective. So in the flip side of that, of companies that are very rigid and don't want, like they think they're the most important and don't want to let go, what happens is not only are they overworked, burnt out, but their team members, everybody in the company is overworked, burned out, unhappy. They're just going in, clocking in. And I guess that's where silent quitting kind of comes in. Like they're like, okay, I'm here for 9 to 5. I'm just going to come here, do this job because I don't have a choice and I'm going to leave. Right. And that is something that we see a lot of, especially these days.
Yeah. And I feel like that's why it's so important to maintain that why and have that why, along with, the CEO not thinking they're the most important, but because I feel like a lot of the world right now has a perspective that like like a 9 to 5. Like I had a job before this for 4 years that I was at, and I went back and forth with as the company grew. There was less, less feeling of sway or impact because all of a sudden, we went from a couple hundred clients to a couple thousand, and it got further and further from any actual influence or impact. But when it was early on at that company, like I felt great going to work. Like I felt really good. Like it was a closer to an understanding of the why things are happening. Not that it was a digital advertising company, so it wasn't like breaking ceilings or anything. But there was enough of an understanding of something happening to get me to not dread going into work. And so if that can be almost prioritized, that why, like even more so than most places are doing, there can be a sort of excitement from employees. Like we're all in this together. We're all doing something. This is some cool stuff. And that has its own sort of feel to it. We've spoken on the podcast a number of times about the word enthusiasm and just how that's kind of a lost driver in a lot of ways. But I feel like it goes hand in hand with that underlying why and having a sense for that. But at the same time, the people higher up have to have a passion for that as well, that then will trickle down. And it's sort of an environment that's fostered that's almost more of like a self-sustaining situation instead of I have to control you into doing these things. But it has to do, with letting go in a lot of ways instead of feeling like you got to stay in control.
I totally agree. One of the things that I've realized is that some of these companies will go in to whatever that they're doing, like you said, a digital marketing agency, for example, will go into it with all of the enthusiasm in the world. Like it's a small group, everybody has ownership, everybody's ready, you're fired up. Like you guys even have sometimes these, weekly or daily stand-ups where everybody is together for a little while, even in a remote environment. But then after a few years, the company is growing into millions, into whatever it is, and there's not that time anymore. And it becomes like instead of you selling what you started initially selling, so in this case, it would be maybe digital marketing, you start feeling like you're just signing contracts, right? You're just selling, getting that next, acquiring that next customer, acquiring that next customer. That's all you're doing. And nobody is there to, hype it up or, and even if they're there to hype it up, it becomes kind of artificial, for lack of a better word, right? And you lose the point, the main reason you started doing this. And it doesn't have to be something that's earth shattering. As long as you're helping another business make money, then that should be exciting, right? But in a way, they kind of turn it into something that's so robotic and something that you're just doing. Hey, I'm paying you. You need to just do this type of thing. And it's because, yep, yeah, it becomes that this like just plain, I'm going to make ads and you're going to give me a check, right? So in their defense, it just becomes too much for them a lot of times where they don't know where to go when they get to a certain level, and it pretty much crashes and burns. And even though it doesn't look like it crashes and burns, that's what's happening, right? And that's when the company just becomes, oh my God, I'm just gonna go in, work my 9 to 5, 5:01, I'm out, right? I'm not staying till 5:10. I don't care if they can pay me overtime. I don't want to be there past whatever time that I have to be there. And that's where, it's downhill from there.
Well, that's really interesting. And it's a question that I've gotten quite a few times over my time in life coaching is, what do I do about a job I don't like? And I've often said, well, there's a number of things you could leave, right? But that's not going to change possibly why you don't like your job. And it may not be the job. It may have nothing to do with the job and everything to do with how you look at the job, why you think you're doing the job, which may not even be the reason you're doing the job. It's funny. I've talked to people. They're like, well, no, I got into this job for this and this and this and this reason. And it's like, all right, now, if you didn't have it, you wouldn't have a roof or water or food well, yeah. And you wouldn't be able to go out. Well, yeah. So are you really doing it for that reason? Or are you doing it to be able to sustain your life? And all of a sudden they're like, oh yeah, I guess I'm choosing to be here. It's like, ha ha ha, you were choosing to be here. Now, what kind of ripple are you making where you are, right? Because up until now you've kind of been a whiny little bitch about it, right? And now you actually get to be in there enjoying yourself. But I have to ask, especially before we wrap up here shortly, everything that we've been talking about here on the corporate level and the entrepreneurial level, in terms of just being open, being vulnerable, actually having a conversation rather than just passing someone a memo and trusting it will get the message across because they've received a paycheck this month. Just actually talking to them like human beings. This is all stuff that translates into everything else that we do. Like if you're going to the grocery store and you're talking to the person across from you who's ringing your groceries through, there's a conversation you could have there rather than just expecting them to ring your groceries through. You could actually have a conversation, and just in your mentality alone, you're changing the organism, you're changing the structure that we call society rather than just the corporation that we work within. So it's just envisioning yourself within a slightly larger machine. So that said, how much do you find yourself doing that in your day-to-day interactions with friends and family where they're taking shit seriously and you're like, have you thought about it this way?
I do that a lot. Guilty. I do. So I'm the one in my regular day to day that's like, and I have to say, I'm not into just pushing positivity on people, like getting it to a point where it's toxic positivity. But also, I am the one that says, hey, we can look at it this way, or we can look at it that way. Which one works best, right? Which one is beneficial? Let's go with the beneficial one. And I'm also one that likes a solution because I'm like, yo, you've been talking about this for 2 weeks now. Like, what are we gonna do to fix it? Because if there's not something to fix it, then you can either accept it or we can move on. But we can't just stay stuck in this, right? So I do give that tough love too. But I am the one at the grocery store that's, hey, how are you? Like, or thank you, at least like something, just to make it a little bit more human. And the word unapologetic is a word that I used to love, but I feel like it's being used in a way that makes people think that they're no longer in society, right? And so I try not to use it unless it's really what I want to say, because we still have to live in community. We still have to live in society. And, maybe we should act like it.
Because people feel things like we do.
Yes, exactly.
And it's almost like the perspective of being, looking at society as something separate versus just being society. There's a difference in the value, I guess, the attention that you pay each situation. It isn't like this sort of cerebral thing. It's like, oh, society isn't separate from me, so society is kind of reflective of me, and so every interaction that I have can have some, even if it's, seems unnoticeable, there's going to be ripples sent, and there's a beauty in that. My last question, this might not be something that you think about that much, but I'm curious. There's been a lot of shifts in the working world the last couple years from, more in-person 9 to 5 type situations to more at-home work and back and forth. Do you ever sit and ponder on what you think a more, maybe not ideal, sort of pinnacle of a working society looks like? But do you have any thoughts on maybe a hot take on how the current society and the way that we work and interact could shift? Could be in the working world, could be just in general.
Um, it's actually something I do think about, especially like with, like you said, shifting from face to face to remote. I'm all for remote work. I'll say that up front. But a hot take that I have is, even though we're a society that should be communicating, like we have all these means of communication. I feel like we don't communicate enough, or maybe not well. And I think that's my hot take. Like, if only we learn how to communicate and communicate clearly with one another, whether we're remote, whether we're hybrid, just whether we're in just, being part of society, I think it would make a huge shift and a huge difference, because the miscommunication and I thought they said this when they really meant that is so huge right now that it's disheartening.
It all just starts, as you said, with self-awareness. The more aware you are of yourself, the more likely you are to venture out a little bit beyond your comfort zone. And in that, you'll find empathy for everybody else who's clinging to their comfort zone. And then we can actually have a discussion. Stephanie, this has been absolutely amazing. I really appreciate you reaching out to us and being here on the podcast with us today. To our listener, I want to say thank you for joining us. And of course, if you would like to follow Stephanie, where can they find you on social media and whatnot?
Sure, sure. If they'd like to follow me, I'm on LinkedIn, and it's Dembo Inc. My handle. It's DEMBOINC. And on Instagram, if you search Dembo Inc., you'll find me. But my handle is Stephanie_Z Coradin, so it's just my name. And on Facebook as well, just my name. And my website is demboinc.com.
Appreciate that. Well, this has been a fucking blast of a conversation, Stephanie. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I'm sure we'll be in communication at some point in the future, and I very much look forward to it.
Yes, thank you guys for having me. I had so much fun, and I love these types of conversations. We just freestyle and talk shop. I loved it. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, listener. We appreciate you dropping by. We will see you next time.
Bye, everyone.